It was a busy evening at the city's most elegant restaurant, a place where the chandeliers sparkled brighter than most people's homes and the tables were filled with guests in the finest clothes. The soft hum of conversation mixed with the gentle clinking of fine china and silverware. The air smelled of freshly cooked delicacies, each one more enticing than the last. The lighting was perfect, casting a warm glow over the polished wooden floors and the sparkling glasses. Everything about the restaurant screamed sophistication and wealth, and everyone who entered felt the weight of its prestige. Among the staff, there was a young woman who had been working here for several years. She moved with a quiet confidence, balancing trays effortlessly, greeting guests with polite smiles, and making sure that everyone's experience was as perfect as possible. She had learned early on that being a waitress in a high-end restaurant required more than just taking orders. It required patience, awareness, and the ability to stay calm even under pressure. She had seen all sorts of people come and go, and she had learned to handle every situation with grace. That evening, the restaurant had attracted an unusual guest. A billionaire, known for his immense wealth and his sharp tongue, had arrived for a private dinner with a few of his influential friends. He was a man who had everything money could buy, yet he carried an air of arrogance that often made people uneasy. His reputation for belittling those he considered beneath him was well known, and many who worked in the hospitality industry dreaded encounters with him. As he entered the restaurant, heads turned, and whispers floated across the room. Everyone recognized him instantly, from the maitre d' to the other guests. The young waitress noticed him immediately. She had served many high-profile individuals in her career, but she knew that this particular billionaire could be difficult. She adjusted her uniform, took a deep breath, and prepared herself for what might come. Despite the anticipation of something unpleasant, she reminded herself to remain calm and professional. She had a way of keeping her composure, and she knew that sometimes the best way to handle someone difficult was to stay polite, collected, and observant. The billionaire was escorted to a private table near the center of the restaurant. His friends followed, chatting among themselves and occasionally glancing around the room with quiet amusement. The atmosphere around the table seemed tense even before anyone had ordered a single dish. The waitress approached cautiously, her tray balanced in one hand and her notepad ready. She greeted him with a warm smile and asked if he had any preferences for his meal that evening. He looked at her with a raised eyebrow, as if assessing her worth in a single glance. The smile she offered was met with a sharp, almost dismissive glance. He leaned back slightly in his chair, folding his arms and surveying the room, making it clear that he was a man used to being in control and having everyone else follow his lead. The waitress didn't let it faze her. She had seen this type of behavior before, and she knew that staying calm and professional was her best defense. As she took his order, she noticed the subtle signs of impatience in his body language. A slight tapping of fingers on the table, the way his eyes scanned the room, and the occasional smirk that seemed to challenge those around him. She made mental notes to stay attentive, ensuring that every detail was perfect. She returned to the kitchen and relayed the order, instructing the staff to prepare everything exactly to the specifications of the billionaire and his guests. She knew that one small mistake could be noticed and criticized, and in this setting, criticism could come harshly. While the kitchen prepared the meal, the young waitress moved among the other tables, serving dishes, refilling drinks, and managing requests with the same calm efficiency. Her colleagues whispered about the billionaire, sharing stories of his past visits and how he often made unreasonable demands. Yet, despite the tension, she stayed focused, not letting gossip distract her. She reminded herself that her job was to provide excellent service, no matter who she was serving. When the food was finally ready, she approached the billionaire's table again. She placed each dish carefully, ensuring the presentation was perfect. He glanced at the plates briefly and then looked at her with an expression that could only be described as testing. It was clear he was evaluating her, perhaps even looking for a reason to criticize. She held his gaze for a moment, offering a polite smile, and then stepped back slightly, giving him space. The room felt quieter around the table, as if everyone sensed the tension building. It wasn't long before the billionaire decided to speak. He asked questions in a tone that carried a subtle edge, probing about the restaurant's management, the staff, and even the ingredients of the dishes. His friends watched with mild amusement, expecting the waitress to stumble or give an answer that would allow him to assert his dominance. But she responded calmly and clearly, answering each question with confidence. Her voice was steady, and she spoke with a knowledge that suggested she took pride in her work and respected her profession. The billionaire's smirk didn't fade. Instead, it seemed to grow sharper. He decided to make his next move. In front of his friends and the other guests, he made a comment intended to belittle her, questioning her competence and implying that someone of her position should not know so much. It was a deliberate attempt to humiliate her, and the room shifted with the sudden tension. Guests who had been quietly enjoying their meals now turned their attention toward the unfolding interaction. Some were curious, others uncomfortable, but all were watching closely. The young waitress paused for just a brief moment, taking a deep breath. She knew that reacting with anger or defensiveness would only escalate the situation. Instead, she reminded herself of the power of calmness, of staying composed under pressure. She prepared her response carefully, choosing words that were polite yet assertive, words that would not only defend her professionalism but also subtly highlight the arrogance of the billionaire's behavior. What she said next would change the dynamics of the evening. Her calm, measured reply was unexpected, catching the billionaire off guard. He had anticipated submission, nervousness, or perhaps a flustered reaction, but instead, he received clarity, confidence, and dignity. Her words were delivered with such poise that even the other guests felt compelled to take notice. There was a quiet authority in her voice that contrasted sharply with his brashness. For a moment there was silence. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the billionaire's next move. He blinked, as if trying to process what had just happened. His friends shifted uncomfortably, realizing that the situation had not gone as they expected. The waitress stood tall, maintaining her composure and offering a polite, reassuring smile. She had done her job, but more importantly, she had maintained her self-respect in the face of arrogance. As she stepped away from the table, other staff members glanced at her with admiration, silently acknowledging her courage and professionalism. The atmosphere around the table began to change subtly. The billionaire, though still wealthy and powerful, had been momentarily humbled by the calm and confident demeanor of someone he had intended to belittle. It was a small but significant victory, one that would leave a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. The evening continued, but the tone had shifted. The young waitress moved through the restaurant with the same grace and efficiency as before, but now there was an added sense of respect from those around her. Guests whispered softly, sharing their impressions of the encounter. The billionaire's friends were quieter, perhaps reconsidering the assumptions they had made about authority, respect, and the strength of character. In that luxurious restaurant, amid the clinking of glasses and the soft laughter of satisfied diners, a quiet triumph had taken place. It was not a victory measured by wealth or status, but by integrity, composure, and the courage to stand firm in the face of arrogance. The young waitress had proven that true strength often comes from calmness, intelligence, and dignity, leaving a mark that would be remembered long after the evening ended. The moment after the young waitress had delivered her calm and composed reply, there was a noticeable shift at the billionaire's table. He had expected embarrassment, and instead, he found himself confronted with dignity and intelligence. A faint ripple of surprise moved through his group of friends, while the other guests watched curiously, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. It was the kind of situation that quietly demanded attention without any loud declarations. The young waitress, however, remained poised, giving him a polite smile while she noted in her mind that the next steps had to be handled carefully. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. He was used to controlling situations, and being taken off guard was not something he encountered often. Yet, in that instant, he felt a flicker of something he did not expect. Respect, albeit reluctant, for someone who had handled him with calm authority. His friends exchanged glances, some clearly amused, others slightly uneasy. The waitress's reaction had changed the energy in the room. For the first time that evening, the billionaire found himself in an unfamiliar position, one where he was being quietly observed and judged. The waitress stepped back to allow the guests a moment of privacy, though she remained within reach in case they needed anything. Her movements were smooth, natural, and unhurried, yet there was a subtle confidence in the way she carried herself. It was clear to anyone paying attention that she did not feel inferior to anyone in the room. She had learned that in her line of work, dignity and composure mattered as much as efficiency, if not more. And that evening it was going to be her strongest tool. As the billionaire's dinner continued, he decided to test her further. He asked questions that seemed designed to provoke uncertainty, like querying the origins of certain ingredients or questioning the restaurant's service policies. Most people would have stumbled or responded nervously under the scrutiny. But the young waitress answered each question with clarity, providing precise information while keeping her tone respectful. She did not challenge his authority, but neither did she allow him to undermine hers. It was a delicate balance, and she executed it flawlessly. Each response she gave was met with a mix of reactions from the billionaire and his friends. His smirk remained, but it was now tinged with curiosity rather than arrogance. The guests at surrounding tables whispered quietly, recognizing the rare moment when someone had successfully held their ground against wealth and power. For the billionaire, it was a different kind of challenge than he usually faced. He was used to people submitting to his status, to bending their manners in his favor. But this waitress had something he could not buy: composure and self-respect. At one point, he decided to escalate his attempt. He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering, intending to humiliate her in front of his friends with a pointed comment about her position and education. The room fell into a brief silence, as if everyone sensed that a confrontation was about to occur. Even some of the other staff members paused in their duties, curious to see how she would respond. This was a test, not just of knowledge or skill, but of courage and self-assurance. The young waitress took a quiet breath, letting a calmness settle over her. She understood that reacting emotionally or defensively would play into his hands. Instead, she chose her words carefully, crafting a response that was polite yet firm. When she spoke, it was with a tone that radiated confidence, demonstrating that she valued her work and herself without demeaning anyone else. Her reply was thoughtful, showing that intelligence and calmness could counter arrogance effectively. Her words caused a noticeable pause at the billionaire's table. He blinked, momentarily disarmed by the composure she displayed. His friends looked on with growing surprise, realizing that the scene unfolding before them was unusual. This was not a confrontation where one person dominated the other. It was a subtle battle of character, and the young waitress had shown remarkable strength. The quiet strength of someone who knew her worth, who understood that respect could not be demanded through wealth alone. As she continued her service, she remained attentive, subtly ensuring that each dish was perfectly presented and each guest was satisfied. She moved between tables with the same smooth efficiency, yet there was a new sense of confidence in her movements. She had passed an invisible test, proving to herself and everyone around that she could handle even the most challenging situations with dignity. Guests who noticed the interaction exchanged quiet looks of admiration, silently acknowledging her courage and professionalism. The billionaire, still seated at the table, leaned back and seemed to reflect quietly. His initial intent had been to humiliate, to assert dominance, but he had been met with calm and intelligent resistance. He was accustomed to winning through intimidation, yet here was someone who could not be easily shaken. A flicker of respect appeared in his expression, though it was subtle and reluctant. He was beginning to understand that power and wealth alone could not command respect. It had to be earned through action, demeanor, and character. As the meal progressed, the atmosphere around the table softened. The tension that had initially filled the room shifted into something more balanced. The billionaire's friends began to relax, realizing that the young waitress had handled the situation with a finesse they had not anticipated. The guests who had been watching curiously now seemed impressed, not just by her service, but by the way she had stood her ground. It was a rare moment where humility, intelligence, and composure quietly outshone wealth and arrogance. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, her colleagues were buzzing with quiet excitement. They had witnessed a remarkable display of poise under pressure. Conversations among the staff were filled with admiration and subtle pride, acknowledging that one of their own had faced a challenge with remarkable grace. It was the kind of moment that staff members remembered and told stories about for years, a lesson in professionalism, courage, and dignity. The young waitress continued to maintain her professional demeanor, attending to the rest of the guests with ease. She was aware that every action mattered, that her continued calmness would reinforce the impression she had already made. Even as the billionaire occasionally glared or made subtle attempts to regain control of the situation, she remained composed. There was no panic, no nervous laughter, just steady attention and grace. By the end of the meal, it was clear that the night had taken on a different tone. The billionaire had encountered someone who refused to be intimidated, and it was a lesson he would likely not forget. His friends had witnessed a demonstration of quiet strength, understanding that authority is not always derived from wealth or status alone. The young waitress had shown that true power lies in composure, knowledge, and dignity. As she cleared the table and thanked the guests for dining at the restaurant, there was a subtle change in the room. Respect, often silent and understated, had been earned. The billionaire may not have openly acknowledged it, but the energy around him had shifted. The waitress walked away with a sense of quiet accomplishment, knowing that she had upheld her professionalism and self-respect in a moment that could have gone very differently. The night continued, with other guests enjoying their meals and the staff attending to every need. Yet, the story of the young waitress's calm and intelligent handling of the billionaire lingered in the minds of those who witnessed it. It was a reminder that even in the presence of wealth and arrogance, courage, composure, and dignity could make a lasting impact. Her actions had not only maintained her own integrity but had also left an impression on everyone present, a subtle but profound reminder of the power of calm and confidence in the face of challenge. As the evening went on, the young waitress continued her work, moving from table to table with the same calm efficiency that had marked her earlier interactions. Every gesture she made was deliberate and thoughtful, from refilling glasses to checking on guests' comfort. Her focus never wavered, even though the billionaire's table remained a silent point of tension in the room. Guests continued to watch subtly, curious about the ongoing dynamic between the powerful man and the composed young woman. The billionaire, having initially tried to intimidate her, now found himself quietly observing her. Each time she approached, he noticed not just her poise, but the care she took with every detail. It wasn't just about taking orders or delivering food. It was about attention, presence, and pride in her work. There was something almost magnetic in the way she carried herself, quiet strength that drew attention without seeking it. He decided to test her once more, perhaps out of curiosity or the need to reassert control. He asked a question that seemed simple but was loaded with condescension, inquiring whether she understood the complexity of managing a table like his and whether she could handle unexpected changes. Most people might have faltered under such scrutiny, but she answered with steady confidence. Her words were clear and measured, showing that she understood her responsibilities deeply and was more than capable of handling challenges with composure. There was no arrogance in her response, just certainty and professionalism. The billionaire's friends exchanged subtle glances. They had been watching, partly entertained, partly impressed, and now there was a growing realization that the young waitress had quietly gained the upper hand in terms of respect. The room's energy had shifted. The tension that had hung heavily now carried a new note: admiration. While the billionaire still maintained his authority and wealth, her calm confidence subtly challenged the usual power dynamics. The waitress then continued serving other guests, all the while keeping an eye on the billionaire's table. She noticed when he made small gestures of impatience, slight frowns, or subtle sighs. These were cues that someone might use to intimidate or assert dominance, but she neither reacted with fear nor irritation. Instead, she adapted smoothly, anticipating his needs and adjusting her service in a way that made it seem effortless. Her attention to detail and calm composure began to stand out even more in contrast to his shifting moods. At one point, a minor issue arose with the timing of one of the dishes. The kitchen had prepared it slightly differently than requested, and the billionaire noticed immediately. He looked around sharply, his tone carrying a hint of irritation as he questioned the discrepancy. Most servers would have panicked, but she remained composed. With a polite smile, she explained the situation calmly, detailing the steps the kitchen had taken and suggesting a solution that would satisfy the guests without causing conflict. Her explanation was concise, logical, and respectful. The billionaire listened, surprised at how smoothly she handled the moment. His attempt to assert dominance through criticism had been diffused effortlessly. Her colleagues, who had been observing the interaction from a distance, exchanged quiet nods of approval. They understood that she had not only handled a challenging guest, but had also preserved the dignity of the entire staff. This was the kind of professional grace that left a lasting impression. It wasn't about winning an argument or proving superiority. It was about showing respect for oneself and others, even in a tense situation. Meanwhile, the other diners began to notice the subtle change in the atmosphere at the billionaire's table. Where once there had been tension and anticipation, now there was a quiet sense of respect for the young waitress. Guests whispered softly among themselves, acknowledging her ability to remain poised under pressure. Her composure had become a defining feature of the evening, leaving an impression that extended beyond her immediate table. The billionaire, initially determined to dominate, found himself reassessing his approach. He had expected deference and submission, but instead, he was met with steady confidence and professionalism. Her calm intelligence forced him to consider that true respect cannot be commanded through wealth or status alone. It had to be earned, and she had earned it in a way that was subtle yet undeniable. As the meal continued, the young waitress continued to move with the same balance of efficiency and grace. Each interaction, whether with the billionaire or other guests, reinforced the quiet authority she held. She was neither confrontational nor overly assertive. Instead, she demonstrated that professionalism, composure, and confidence could command attention and respect without raising her voice or engaging in conflict. The billionaire's friends began to acknowledge the situation quietly, perhaps recognizing that their companion's usual methods of asserting dominance were not as effective in this context. They observed how he interacted with her now, noting the subtle respect in his posture and tone that had not been present earlier. The young waitress had created an environment where arrogance could not thrive, where respect was earned through calm intelligence and thoughtful action. At a moment when the billionaire leaned back and appeared to reflect, the young waitress approached with a refill. She moved with ease and grace, her movements confident and precise. Her smile was courteous but steady, signaling that she was aware of the tension but unshaken by it. As she topped off glasses and ensured each guest's comfort, there was an understated strength in her presence that drew attention without demanding it. It became clear to everyone watching that the young waitress had achieved something remarkable. She had faced a wealthy and powerful individual who intended to belittle her and had done so with calm intelligence and dignity. Her response had shifted the room's energy, transforming potential humiliation into quiet triumph. The billionaire, while still wealthy and influential, had been momentarily humbled by the strength of someone he had underestimated. Throughout the rest of the evening, the young waitress maintained her composure, providing excellent service to all guests, while subtly ensuring that the billionaire's table remained satisfied. She did not seek recognition or praise. Her focus was on professionalism and integrity. Yet, those who observed her could not help but admire the way she handled the situation, understanding that true strength often manifests in calm confidence rather than loud assertion. By the end of the night, the atmosphere in the restaurant had changed subtly but noticeably. Respect, quiet and understated, had been established where tension had once existed. The billionaire had learned, in his own way, that wealth and arrogance alone could not command respect from someone who possessed dignity and composure. His friends had witnessed an important lesson in humility and character, recognizing that the young waitress had quietly, yet effectively, demonstrated the power of poise and self-respect. As the last guests left and the restaurant staff began to clean up, the young waitress reflected briefly on the evening. She felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had upheld her professionalism, maintained her composure, and handled a difficult situation with grace. It was not about proving anyone wrong or seeking admiration. It was about staying true to herself and her values. The experience left her with a sense of accomplishment, a reminder that confidence and dignity are often more powerful than any attempt to intimidate. Her colleagues offered smiles and quiet congratulations, acknowledging the impressive way she had managed the challenging interaction. There was a shared sense of pride among the staff, a recognition that they had witnessed an example of exceptional professionalism and personal strength. The young waitress's calm demeanor and thoughtful actions had left a lasting impression, not only on the billionaire and his friends but also on those who worked alongside her. The evening's events were a quiet triumph, a story of intelligence, composure, and dignity prevailing over arrogance and wealth. It served as a subtle but powerful reminder that true strength is often demonstrated through calm, thoughtful action rather than force or intimidation. The young waitress had shown that in the face of challenge, grace, confidence, and professionalism can leave a lasting impression, changing the dynamics of a room and the perception of those present. As the evening unfolded, the young waitress continued her work with a quiet confidence that had begun to influence the entire atmosphere of the restaurant. Guests at nearby tables had started to take notice of the interaction between her and the billionaire, curious about the tension that seemed to shift subtly with every gesture and word. There was something compelling about the way she carried herself, calm, professional, and unwavering, even in the face of someone so used to commanding respect through wealth and status. The billionaire, who had initially attempted to belittle her, now found himself in a state of quiet reflection. Each time she approached, he observed more than just her service. He noticed her attention to detail, her grace under pressure, and her ability to maintain dignity in a challenging situation. He had encountered many people who had tried to stand out or assert themselves in his presence, but few had done so without arrogance or confrontation. She had managed to do it with composure, subtly asserting her competence without directly challenging his authority. At one point, a small incident occurred. A dish meant for another table was momentarily misplaced, and the billionaire immediately noticed. There was a brief tension in the air as he prepared to make a sharp comment, perhaps to reassert his dominance. The waitress, however, remained composed. She quickly assessed the situation and calmly explained the mix-up, suggesting a practical solution that would satisfy all parties. Her voice was steady, her demeanor professional, and her response diffused what could have been an embarrassing situation. The billionaire's friends observed quietly, some impressed, some bemused, as the young waitress handled the situation flawlessly. It was becoming clear to them that she possessed a rare combination of intelligence, composure, and professionalism. They had expected drama or submission, but instead, they witnessed quiet authority and strength. The young waitress had demonstrated that respect could not be commanded by wealth alone, and it was starting to leave an impression on everyone present. Throughout the evening, the waitress moved seamlessly between tables, attending to guests' needs while keeping a watchful eye on the billionaire's table. She anticipated requests, refilled drinks without prompting, and ensured that every detail of the dining experience met the highest standard. Her calm presence began to have a ripple effect, influencing the atmosphere around her. Guests who had initially felt tension or curiosity began to relax, drawn into the grace and professionalism she exhibited. The billionaire, for his part, was becoming more introspective. He had expected to dominate the interaction, to make someone feel small, and instead, he found himself quietly challenged. His initial arrogance had been met with patience, intelligence, and quiet strength. It was an unusual experience for him, one that forced him to reconsider the assumptions he had made about authority, respect, and human character. He realized that true respect was not given automatically to wealth or status. It had to be earned, and in this moment, the young waitress had earned it in a profound way. As the meal progressed, the waitress's interactions with other guests continued to reinforce her quiet authority. She handled requests with care, addressed concerns with poise, and maintained a balance between attentiveness and discretion. Each action, Each word conveyed a subtle but unmistakable sense of confidence. Her calmness was not passive. It was active and deliberate, influencing the environment around her and creating a sense of admiration. Among those who noticed, the billionaire, observing this, began to adjust his approach. Instead of attempting to assert dominance through sarcasm or belittlement, he started to engage differently, asking questions in a manner that seemed more curious than confrontational. He listened as she explained the restaurant's practices, the care taken in preparing each dish, and the attention given to every guest. Her knowledge and professionalism were evident, and he found himself impressed despite himself. The dynamic that had begun with tension and potential humiliation had shifted into one of mutual acknowledgement, albeit quiet and understated. Her colleagues in the restaurant began to sense the change as well. They exchanged glances and subtle smiles, recognizing the remarkable way she had handled the billionaire's attempts to intimidate her. It was not only a personal victory for her, but a morale boost for the entire team. They had witnessed an example of grace under pressure, a demonstration of how professionalism, composure, and dignity could command respect in even the most challenging circumstances. As the evening drew toward its later hours, the young waitress continued to manage her responsibilities with care. Each table she approached received the same attentive service, each guest treated with respect and courtesy. Yet, the attention she received from the billionaire and his friends remained a constant undercurrent. They watched, sometimes silently, sometimes with subtle nods, as she navigated the demands of the evening with intelligence and grace. A particularly telling moment occurred when the billionaire made a casual comment meant to test her reaction, questioning whether someone in her position could truly understand the complexities of the restaurant business. She paused briefly, considering her words, and then replied calmly and confidently, explaining her understanding of the work and the importance of attention to detail. Her answer was thoughtful and measured, demonstrating not only her knowledge but also her ability to remain composed under subtle provocation. The reaction was immediate. The billionaire blinked, taken aback by the clarity and confidence of her response. His friends, who had been observing, exchanged looks of quiet surprise and admiration. The room, once filled with tension, now held a sense of respect for the young waitress. She had successfully navigated what could have been a humiliating encounter and turned it into an example of intelligence, composure, and dignity prevailing over arrogance and wealth. As the evening continued, the young waitress's calm presence influenced the atmosphere in subtle ways. Guests who had initially been curious or anxious now felt reassured, drawn into the professionalism she exhibited. The billionaire, while still a man of considerable influence, seemed to reflect quietly on the encounter. There was a subtle change in his posture, a slight softening in his expression, as he recognized that he had underestimated the quiet strength of someone he had intended to belittle. When the final course was served, and the guests began to prepare for departure, the young waitress approached the billionaire's table one last time. She ensured that every need was met, thanked the guests politely, and left them with a sense of satisfaction. Her demeanor remained calm and professional, but there was an unmistakable sense of quiet triumph. She had navigated a challenging situation with grace, intelligence, and dignity, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed it. The billionaire and his friends eventually departed, and the restaurant staff could feel the change in the room. The young waitress's actions had subtly shifted perceptions, demonstrating that confidence, composure, and professionalism could command respect in ways that wealth and status alone could not. Her colleagues offered quiet congratulations, acknowledging the remarkable way she had handled the evening's challenges. As she completed her final tasks for the night, the young waitress reflected briefly on the events. There was satisfaction in knowing that she had maintained her professionalism, handled a difficult guest with intelligence and composure, and upheld her self-respect. The evening had been a test of character, and she had passed with grace. It was a reminder that true strength often manifests in calmness, dignity, and thoughtful action, leaving a lasting impression far beyond the immediate moment. The evening ended with the restaurant quieting down, guests gone, and staff completing their closing duties. Yet, The story of the young waitress's calm and intelligent handling of the billionaire lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. It was a moment that exemplified the power of composure, confidence, and dignity in the face of arrogance and wealth. Her actions had left an indelible mark, a quiet but profound testament to the strength of character and professionalism. The next day at the restaurant, the young waitress arrived early, ready to begin her shift. The memory of the previous evening was still fresh in her mind. She had handled a challenging situation with calmness and dignity, and the experience had left a lasting impression on her, as well as on the staff and guests who had witnessed it. The atmosphere in the restaurant felt different somehow, a quiet energy of respect lingering in the air. Her colleagues greeted her warmly, offering congratulations and small gestures of appreciation. They had talked quietly among themselves about the events, recognizing the remarkable way she had maintained her composure in the face of the billionaire's attempts to intimidate her. The young waitress smiled politely, acknowledging their words but remaining humble. She knew that her actions were not about personal recognition, but about doing her job with integrity and professionalism. As the morning passed, the restaurant gradually filled with guests. The young waitress moved gracefully among the tables, attending to orders and ensuring that each guest's experience was smooth and enjoyable. Her calm confidence, honed over years of experience, made her movements seem effortless, and it was clear to anyone observing that she had the respect of both her colleagues and the patrons. During a quiet moment, the manager approached her. There was a sense of admiration in his tone as he spoke, acknowledging the way she had handled the previous night's challenges. He noted that the billionaire and his friends had left the restaurant with a newfound respect for her professionalism. The manager expressed pride in having such a capable and composed team member, and the young waitress felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that her actions had positively influenced the perception of the restaurant and its staff. Word of the previous night's events had begun to spread beyond the restaurant. Some of the guests who had witnessed the interaction shared their observations, praising the young waitress for her calm demeanor and intelligence. The story carried with it a lesson that many found inspiring: that composure, professionalism, and self-respect can command respect in ways that wealth and arrogance cannot. The young waitress did not seek this attention, but she accepted it with humility, understanding that it reflected the impact of her actions. Later in the day, a delivery arrived for the restaurant. Among the items was a handwritten note from the billionaire himself, expressing his acknowledgement of the young waitress's professionalism and the way she had handled the previous evening's interactions. It was a brief message, but the words carried weight. It was a subtle admission of respect and a recognition of the quiet strength she had displayed. The young waitress read the note carefully, a sense of satisfaction washing over her. She folded it neatly, placing it safely in her locker, and returned to her duties with the same focus and dedication as before. As the restaurant continued to serve guests, the young waitress noticed that the energy around her had shifted. There was a sense of admiration from some guests, subtle nods of respect from colleagues, and even occasional glances from regular patrons who had heard about the story. The impact of her actions was rippling outward, demonstrating that courage and composure can leave lasting impressions far beyond the immediate moment. During a busy lunch service, the young waitress handled multiple tables with the same calm efficiency. Each interaction reinforced her reputation for professionalism and grace. When a minor issue arose with an order, she addressed it quickly and effectively, diffusing potential frustration with a polite smile and a clear explanation. Guests responded positively, some commenting on how well she managed the service and how calm she remained even under pressure. It was evident that her example had set a standard for others to follow. By mid-afternoon, the restaurant had settled into a steady rhythm. The young waitress took a brief moment to reflect, realizing that her actions had not only maintained her own dignity, but had also influenced the perceptions of others in a positive way. She understood that true strength is often quiet, demonstrated through composure, intelligence, and thoughtful action rather than loud displays or confrontation. Her experience had reinforced a valuable lesson. Respect is earned through integrity, professionalism, and self-assuredness. Later, the billionaire's note became a topic of conversation among the staff. While he had never been a frequent visitor, his acknowledgement carried significance. The young waitress's colleagues expressed admiration and curiosity, discussing how she had handled the evening and the subtle way she had earned respect. Her humility and composure became a model for others, demonstrating that confidence and professionalism could influence even those accustomed to commanding attention through wealth and status. As the day drew to a close, the young waitress continued her duties, attending to final guests and ensuring that the restaurant was ready for the next day. Her mind briefly wandered to the events of the previous evening, recognizing the personal growth and confidence she had gained from navigating a challenging situation successfully. It was a quiet victory, one that would remain with her and inform her future interactions. The restaurant's atmosphere had subtly shifted. Guests and staff alike had witnessed the impact of calmness, composure, and dignity. The young waitress had demonstrated that true strength lies not in wealth, arrogance, or intimidation, but in the quiet assurance of one's abilities and the integrity with which one carries out responsibilities. The experience left a lasting impression on everyone present, including the billionaire and his friends, who had learned a subtle but important lesson in humility and respect. As the final guests left and the lights were dimmed, the young waitress reflected on the evening and the following day. She felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, understanding that her professionalism had made a difference, not through confrontation, but through composure, intelligence, and thoughtful action. Her colleagues expressed appreciation and admiration, yet she remained humble, knowing that the true value of her actions lay in maintaining dignity and professionalism under pressure. The story of the young waitress and the billionaire would become part of the restaurant's lore, a lesson in the power of calmness, integrity, and self-respect. Guests who heard of the story were inspired, recognizing that true strength often comes from quiet confidence and composure. The young waitress had turned a potentially humiliating situation into an example of grace and intelligence prevailing over arrogance, leaving a mark that would be remembered by staff and patrons alike. In the days and weeks that followed, the young waitress continued to work with the same dedication and poise. Her colleagues continued to respect her, and guests recognized her professionalism. The experience had reinforced a valuable principle: that integrity, composure, and intelligence are qualities that inspire admiration and earn respect in ways that wealth and status cannot. She had proven, through quiet confidence and thoughtful action, that dignity and professionalism are among the most powerful tools one can possess. The billionaire, while perhaps not openly acknowledging it beyond his note, had been impacted by the experience. His perception of the young waitress and the staff had shifted subtly, a recognition that respect is earned through character, not intimidation. The young waitress's calm response and composed demeanor had left a lasting impression, demonstrating that true strength often manifests in subtle, thoughtful ways rather than loud or aggressive displays. As the young waitress closed out her shift, she felt a sense of fulfillment. She had faced a challenge, maintained her composure, and upheld her professionalism. The events had left an indelible mark on her, reinforcing the value of grace under pressure, intelligence, and quiet confidence. Her actions had influenced others, earned respect, and created a lasting story of integrity and professionalism that would continue to inspire both colleagues and guests for a long time. The restaurant settled into quietness as the day ended. The young waitress completed her final tasks with care, reflecting on the journey she had navigated. She understood that the true measure of strength lies not in dominance, but in the ability to face challenges with calm, dignity, and integrity. Her experience had proven that composure, intelligence, and thoughtful action are among the most powerful ways to command respect, leaving a lasting impression on everyone fortunate enough to witness it. The story of the young waitress and the billionaire would continue to resonate, a timeless example of grace and professionalism prevailing over arrogance and wealth.